We're all just talking about GI Joe, all fans of the same thing. Anytime you guys are ready, we can start talking.
And it's skybound with the Talking Joe guys. Everyone calm down. We're here to talk comics, and it's skybound with the Talking Joe guys. Everyone calm down. We're here to talk comics, skybound. At Skybound. Hey, it's me, Mark, and welcome to Talking Joe, the G.I. Joe Comics podcast. Today it is a super special episode as we will be talking to the Duke writer, Joshua Williamson. We will also be talking to the Cobra Commander writer, Joshua Williamson, and indeed also joined by the forthcoming G.I. Joe writer, Joshua Williamson. But I will not be talking to these three writers alone. As always, I will be joined by my co-host. It's a real American Tim. It's Tim Finn.
Hello, Mark, and hello, listeners and viewers.
So, Tim, today we are talking to Joshua Williamson, the writer of creator-owned titles, including Ghosted, Nailbiter, and Birthright at Image Comics. He is also the writer of many DC comics, including, but not limited to, Superman, The Flash, Green Arrow, Batman and Robin, and crossover events like Dark Crisis and October's All-In Special, which is a big part of the launch of the next phase of the DC universe. He's all over the web. Instagram, Joshua Williamson, one word. Joshua Williamson, thejoshuawilliamson.com is his website, and he is on X, formerly known as Twitter, Williamson_Josh. So that's where you can find him on the internet, but we can find him in our interview, which is now. Welcome, Joshua. It's great to have you on Talking Joe, finally.
Yeah.
We've spoken to a lot of people in the Energon universe. You're one of the key people we haven't yet been able to get some time with, so it's great to have you on.
Yeah, for sure. I'm glad we finally got to talk. I know I can be elusive. I can be a little elusive sometimes. I can kind of run off and do my own thing sometimes. So I'm, it's because I'm just so busy writing G.I. Joe. That's really the truth of it, and building out plans. And so I'm always like, hard to get hold of for interview stuff. But I'm glad I'm here and we can talk about G.I. Joe because I love talking about G.I. Joe.
I have not been offended that you have been elusive because I have assumed every time Mark has asked and you have said no, you're just sitting at a typewriter writing G.I. Joe scripts, sitting at a typewriter, emailing your collaborators and coordinating. I know the only thing that could keep you from joining Talking Joe is very specifically Energon Universe scripts.
Well, I want to say, though, the person that was saying no was never me. It was probably always my assistant. Like, my schedule is very much run by other people who are like, leave him alone. He needs to focus on working. Otherwise, I'll just sit there and talk about comics all day. So they know what is best. But yeah, go ahead and ask me, what is your normal first question? I want to hear this.
Our normal first question is, geographically, where are you? And can you tell us a little bit about the room that you're in?
Oh, yeah. Okay. So my name is Joshua Williamson. I live in Portland, Oregon. I grew up in California, but I came up here almost 20 years ago now, which is crazy to think about. And this room, so it's funny, years ago, I was at a table full of different creators. I'm going to name drop here for a moment, so please forgive me, but I'm at a table full of comic book creators. And we're talking about, when you turn 40, what would you get for yourself? Like, what are gifts for yourself, kind of thing, right? And I remember Scott Snyder, he had just turned 40, and he was like, oh, he bought this like muscle car. He got this like big muscle car, and everybody there was like, oh, I'll take a vacation, I'll do this, I'll do that. Like, everyone had like a thing, and I was the one that was like, I want to build an office. I was like, I have this dream office that I've always wanted to build that is almost like working in a comic book store, but not really, right? So it was like, I have this idea of what I want to do, and I had designed it for years. And so when we had bought this house, we had it for a while. I always knew I wanted to build it. We wanted to add on to the house, and so worked with some designers and an architecture firm, and we built it. And it is nuts in here. I mean, I think at some point I will probably do a tour of it. Right now it's a little messy, so I can't do a tour. But it's like, this backdrop goes on for a bit. Like it goes around the corner, and this keeps on going. And this is mostly where like toys and books go. I have like this is over here is a big like DC section. Over here it keeps going. It goes around the corner. I have some spinner racks in here. Over here I have like kitchenette, but it is covered in GI Joe toys. So I have like the Hiss tank. I got the Stinger, and then I got the Vamp, and then I have the Air Striker. But then I also have other stuff over here too. Like I have a giant life-size Batman cowl over here from Batman Returns and some things like that. Over here is like a Marvel section. There's also some toys. The other side over here is like a lounge area where I have couches and stuff, but I also have like 100 inch whiteboard that I can work off of. But, and this is probably my most like indulgent thing I did, I have a button on my desk that when I push it, it will turn the whiteboard into a projector. Like an actual projector screen will come down, and there is a projector up here. I can watch movies in here. And then I have like another section over here that has like, there's just piles and piles of GI Joe toys that haven't been opened yet over here. And then I have a bunch of different like creator owned books. Over here, I have an arcade that's like a bunch of one-up arcades. And there's a bathroom. So this place is nuts. I mean, it is like my kids will come up here and they hang out during the day and stuff. And so this place is like, it is very much like a comic book toy video game like playground up here. So yeah, that is a bit of the tour of this room I'm in right now.
That's excellent. Thank you. All right. We know we have a limited slice of time. So
yeah, sorry. We can go a little long.
No. We like long answers. Normally on Talking Joe, we like the longest answers. Okay, Mark, you jump in, and then I've got my question, Mark, after you do one or two.
I was going to say, while we're talking about the space that you're in now, I was going to ask, in terms of writing, you're doing a lot of writing, you're doing a lot of books. So do you have like a preferred place to be writing? Can you be writing anywhere on the go, or is the best place in your room, or maybe with the distractions, it needs to be somewhere that isn't your room?
No, it has to be this room. I don't write when I'm traveling. So it's weird, right? Like there's a difference between writing and typing. And so writing is done it's my notebook, it's on the whiteboard. So if I'm doing whiteboard work, it's in here. It's in this room, right? If I'm doing a lot of writing is in my head. So I have a lot every book has a notebook, right? So I have like a GI Joe book, and it's very specific about GI Joe stuff, and so I will work out of that notebook. I'll come up with ideas, have meetings, people will just jot stuff down, and a lot of it is like in my head. So like if I go to the gym, I'm on a treadmill and I'm like, you're thinking about it and you're like, oh, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. But when it comes to the actual act of typing, like sitting down and being like, okay, this is it, I'm in it. Because like when I'm driving, I'll think of story ideas. But then when it's like the actual physical act of typing, I would even call it writing. It's like just typing up all of this stuff, right? It's like everything's in my head, everything's in the notebooks, everything's on the whiteboards, and then just consolidating it down into a script. I kind of have to be in this room for that. It's like it's just my place. It's almost like it's like I'm in a rocket ship. I put my headphones on and I just go deep, and then it's like take a day or two just typing. But usually if I'm writing, it takes me about a week, like 5 days to write a comic. Usually I can do it faster than that, but 5 days is like the ideal. And it's like, a lot of times Monday and Tuesday are spent with whiteboards and sort of like the puzzle pieces getting put around and starting to figure out what order things are going to go in. And like a little bit of light, typing, but mostly just figuring these pieces out. And then starting Wednesday is usually when I start like actually typing, and then I try to be done by the end of Thursday so that Friday I can actually read it and look at it and go, what would I change? But that's usually kind of how the process is. But yeah, I'm in this room. That's part of why I want this room to be dope, because I'm like, I spend a humongous chunk of my life in this room. It is where I spend a huge chunk of my day. So I wanted to make sure it was a good environment to be creative in.
Yeah, I can empathize with that. Can I continue on with that same thought, where you're talking about that, taking 5 days to do a script. When you're working on all of these different
Mhm.
multiple books, which it seems to be more than four.
Yeah, it used to be a lot. It's cut down.
How do you space that out? Is it like a 5 day run, a particular script, and then you move on, or?
That is like the ideal. I mean, everything changes, because it's like, I might have notes, I might have to write something different. There have been times. There was a window where I was writing like 10 books a month. And so in that window, it was insane. It was like the first half of the day is this book and the second half of the day is this book. And so I had moments where it was like kind of all over the place. The way I sort of do things now is that like the first half of the day is dedicated to whatever that week's book is, right? So like, let's say for example, this week was a G.I. Joe week. It's like from 7 to probably about 1. That's what I'm doing. Like I am working on that. And then from about 1 through the rest of the day is what I like to call the business of comics. So it's emails, it's correspondence, it's talking to people, it's meetings. Sometimes I'll have meetings like now earlier in the day. I try to keep them to Wednesdays if I do that. But then that is where sometimes it's like, okay, what else is going on? Like, what else do I have to work on? What else do I have to sort of develop or put together? I do a lot of that in that space, the 1 to 5:30 space. So, I mean, I definitely been here for a long time. So I try to break it up, and I just noticed that if I have structure plus time, it allows me to be a little more efficient when it comes to getting stuff done.
Cool.
Can you describe, since the context of our conversation today is G.I. Joe issue number 1 out November 13th, 2024. Can you talk about a particularly successful issue number 1 you have written and what went into it?
That I've written.
Yes, and what made it a good issue number 1?
I love issue 1s. I'm fascinated by them. Like, I love the craft of issue 1s. I'm obsessed with this. I look at issue 1s. I analyze them. I love when people, I get to read issue 1s in advance or read issue 1 scripts from other people. And so I really put a lot of thought into what my issue 1s are like. So asking me to pick one in particular, I think is kind of hard. Because it's like, I mean, I'm honest. I put a lot of thought into issue 1s, right? So it's like when I did this book called Nailbiter with Image years ago, like with that one in particular, I was really happy with it. And I put a lot of thought, even with Superman, with Robin, with Green Arrow, like, they're all different kinds of issue 1s, so I definitely factor that into it. I'm always looking for like whenever other writers come to me and they tell me their idea, they're like, I have an idea for a book. And I always ask them the same question. I go, what's your last page of issue 1? And it's like, because I feel like that is really your ad for the next issue. It is kind of your definitive statement. It's the last word, right? So I'm always very curious about that. I always like looking at the way people open up books. I like, my wife reads a lot of, I'm going to call them books without pictures. She reads a lot of them. And so we have books everywhere. We're very much a reader family. So there's always like stacks of books everywhere in this house. And whenever she gets a new book, which is like almost on a weekly basis, I will go and look at what the first line is, because I feel like that's another thing where it's like your introduction to how you bring people into your world, into your story. I'm fascinated by like the thought process behind those kinds of things of like, what is the first thing? What is that first impression you want to put? And I'm always very curious about how people, it says so much about the book and the writer immediately. And so I'm always thinking about that. But yeah, like when I did Robin and Superman and Nailbiter and Birthright's an issue 1 that I kind of grinded out a little bit to get it where I wanted it to be. I will tell you the number one thing I will tell everybody with issue 1s is make them oversized. It drives people crazy, but it's like the more room you have that issue 1, I think the better. So I love, like 30-page issue 1s. But, I think that like Brian K. Vaughan is one of the best issue 1 writers in comics. That guy really, really nails it. So yeah, I think I am obsessed with like how issue 1s are put together. And there is a kind of math to it. Like, I think there really is. I mean, you're bringing people in, you're saying like, come on this journey with me. And how do you do that? I'm always interested in the idea that like, it's not just about the story you're telling, it's how you tell it. And so the issue 1 is so important in that to like, you're basically setting everything up immediately. You're telling them what this book is, what the adventure is about. You're really setting the entire table for them, and so all of that goes into my thoughts on issue ones. But yeah, I agonize over them sometimes. Like I have whiteboards everywhere in here, so like this one right here. Let's see if I can find one that's not too much of a spoiler since this is a video. Basically, I basically structure them. I structure them all down, and so like there are times where it's like, let's say there's no rush. I'll have an issue one written up on a whiteboard, and I will stare at that whiteboard, and then it's like I'll come back to it like a week later and be like, okay, this doesn't work or this works, and it's yeah, because you really want to give as much information as you can, but it's like you're trying to, yeah, you want to bring them into your story in an accessible way, that makes it relatable to them, but also introduces a big world. I always find it, yeah, issue ones are fascinating to me. I love reading issue ones to different people and seeing it and asking them questions about why they did certain things the way they did. And yeah, I hope that answers your question. I like issue ones a lot. I think that they're some of the most ones. Issue two is where shit gets tricky. It's really where stuff is fun, because then you're like, oh, now I'm really in it now. But yeah, I love writing issue ones. It's like some of my favorite stuff to do, and how I have sort of different masters. It's like when I was doing Green Arrow issue one on that one, I was like, this is not going to be that accessible. This is for hardcore fans. So it was a different math for it. Whereas in bringing it back around to G.I. Joe, doing G.I. Joe number one, I was really like, this G.I. Joe number one was interesting because we had the Prelude minis. So it was like, I have the Prelude minis, plus I have this massive mythology that we're diving into, but it's that massive mythology with a twist. Plus, we also want to make it accessible for new readers that are coming in. I mean, that's one of the things that we have heard a lot at conventions that's been really great, are people coming and being like, I've never watched or read anything G.I. Joe, and now I'm super into it. There was somebody I know who worked at one of the big two publishers, had never watched or read anything about G.I. Joe ever. And then he read the first couple issues of Duke and Cobra Commander, and then he just went and bought a bunch of classified toys of the characters he liked. He was like, I like this one, so I'm buying the toy for that character. I love that. So it was like, but also we had the preludes. So it was like, I want to incorporate the preludes, but I want to make it so you don't have to read them. Right? It's always the trick. So it was just an interesting math with this one of like, trying to make it have all of these moving pieces, but still telling a compelling story that makes you excited and makes you want to read the next issue. So yeah, this one was a little bit of a beast at times. It took me a little bit to start get going with it, because also it changed. It went from being a Duke book and a Cobra Commander book to being a team book, and team books are a whole other monster. So it's like having to introduce a team of characters versus one can be really hard. So yeah, it was a lot of math and a lot of thought going into this one.
And what you're sort of describing there's a lot of thought going into it. And when I've heard you talk before, you've sounded very purposeful about specific dialogue. Like when you were talking to Brad and Lisa on the Comic Book Couples podcast, you were, I think, talking about specifically the line, the Duke being a real American nightmare. And then I've heard you talk about getting the perfect last line for the final issue of Batman and Robin. And so I was wondering, what's your approach kind of to getting that perfect dialogue, and if there's any lines from the what we've seen so far in the Energon universe that you were particularly proud of.
Yeah, with dialogue, I think dialogue is fascinating because it's the part you read, right? So it's almost a different part of your mind, right? Because reading, it's so fascinating about comics, how comics really is this merger of like the part of your brain that responds to visuals, the part of your brain that's reading. Like it's actually working certain muscles in your brain in conjunction that you don't always get. It's like even when you're just watching television, because you're hearing it, you're not reading it unless you're doing subtitles, which I think we all do at this point. But if you're not, it's different triggers in your brain. And so when I'm writing, I try to think about that this is dialogue, it's not being heard, it's being read. And so I'm always trying to find that balance along with the visual. And also is like, if the visual can give you the information and then I don't need the dialogue, it's like, cut that dialogue, cut it every time. Like I'm always so happy when I can cut lines versus adding them, and I always like silent beats. I feel like silent visuals can help tell the story. For me, when it comes to some of the dialogue stuff, I think Cobra Commander, once I really started hearing his voice and knowing how he was going to talk to people, I think both books came alive to me. Like I understood what we were doing more after writing our version of Cobra Commander. And I think with issue 3, where he was talking to the Dreadnoks and he's clearly manipulating them, like I love, that's probably my favorite issue we've done so far, is him with the Dreadnoks where they're torturing him, but he's just asking. And it's funny, all he does is ask them questions. If you notice throughout that entire scene, almost everything he says is a question. So it's like I really liked writing that version of him, like our version of Cobra Commander, who is just such this like master manipulator. Because that's always the thing with him. Always like, why do people work with him? Why do they choose to work with him? It's because he's so manipulative, and so it's like, and he knows how to play people. And so that's what this is. And even when you look at the way he's talking to, when you look at the way he talks to Godulus in the first issue, and it's like he's clearly manipulating him, We all know it, but somehow Godulus doesn't know it. Like Python is like, oh, this fucking guy. But for the most part, like, and I love that about him. I love that like everything he says is some kind of slimy manipulation. It's all in, there is an intent behind everything he does. And I think that's something with writing in general. I always look for people who I feel like they're thoughtful, like they thought about it, you know? You can tell when people are just burning. They're just trying to get it out. They're not thinking about it. I try to make sure my characters are always thoughtful, and the work I'm putting in are thoughtful. And so I think Cobra Commander, with a lot of the stuff he says and the things that he kind of touches upon, same with Baroness a little bit. I think sometimes the things that Baroness would say to Duke and sort of how she's trying to get a rise out of Duke was really fun to write. And then Clutch just has these little one-liners every once in a while because he's such a character that have been really fun to write his dialogue. But yeah, I always try to make sure that the lines I'm writing feel like they have intent. You know, even when I'm writing every page in my notebook or the whiteboard or even in the script for the artist, I say, this is what this page is about. You know, like this is what it's about, so that they know what they're going into when they're designing the page. Like they know what it is we're trying to accomplish with that page. And that was the thing with Cobra Commander. It's like, I don't need to have a character outright say, oh, he's manipulating us. It's like, no, the intent of this page is for the reader to understand that by what is happening. And so that's all the stuff that I try to think about when I'm writing.
And in Cobra Commander's dialogue, the sibilance that he has, all of those S's, is that an affectation? Yeah. Is it like damaged from the damage to his face? What do you think is behind that?
I think it's damage. I think in our version of it is damage from him getting hit with the explosion. Like I think that's more so what some of that comes from. And we don't use it that often, you know. It's like, it's funny. My kids are getting into G.I. Joe now. It was interesting, my son this morning, because they play with the toys in the office and stuff, but we watch them on the weekends. And my son he's very like, he likes watching G.I. Joe. So does my daughter. She likes Scarlet and Lady J, and so we watch it with them. And you know, I was watching an episode this last Saturday morning, and it was had Cobra Commander in it a lot, and I was thinking about his voice, and I was like, yeah, it's fun. We don't do the S thing as much as they do in the cartoon. But I was like, I think we wanted to cut back on it a little bit and not make it so much of a thing he does. But yeah, I personally think within the context of our story, that is more so why he has it a little bit, is because of the explosion. Like he's still healing from that explosion too. I mean, you see this a little bit in issue 1, like he's still messed up, you know? So yeah.
How excited are you that artist Tom Riley is signing at my comic book store 3 days after G.I. Joe issue number 1 releases, Hub Comics in Somerville, Massachusetts?
I'm very excited about that. Is he really doing that? So is that Saturday?
Saturday, November 16th, yes.
Oh man, okay. I'm glad I knew that, because I was going to ask him if he wanted to come and sign with me someplace on Saturday. I forgot to ask him. No, that's really exciting. I'm glad that Tom is getting, like, I've been a big fan of Tom's for a really long time. He and we tried working with each other many, many years ago. It didn't work out because of schedules, but I love him. I think he's like one of my favorite storytellers to work with. I mean, he really is. He does everything I love about comics. So it's like, you know, getting to work with him. And one of the things that we've talked about this, and we were talking about this last year at the New York Comic Con last year, that this is an opportunity for more people to see his work, right? Like he's getting more attention because of this than he was before. And I'm really happy with that, because I've been a big fan of his for so long that now it's great that people can see, like, this dude is dope. He is really, really, really good, and he loves it. And he's so humble and modest. And you're just like, this dude he is so. We were talking about that thing about being thoughtful. He is so thoughtful because like it's funny when I turn the script in, he will email me with his layouts, like all these thoughts of like, well, here's why I'm making this decision. I'm making this decision, and most of it I'm like, you do you, dude. Just and then we'll go back and forth on every once in a while, and it's so good that I feel bad anytime I'm like, I have a note, Tom. I'm sorry, I have one change I want to make, and it's funny. Sometimes he'll be like, oh, all right, and then he'll be like, oh no, I made it work. It's cool. This looks good, and I'm like, all right, whew. But yeah, he's awesome. I love Tom, so I'm glad that you get to meet him in like a month.
We had him on the show previously, and I moderated a convention panel with him. So we have met. I know that we're short on
Oh,
time,
great.
so I want to pass the mic back to Mark for what I assume is our final question.
We could probably, Shannon, we could probably do like 2 questions more.
Take it away, Mark.
Oof, choosing my final questions. Just while we're talking about Tom, I guess it sort of is a nice segue that it sounds like there's a lot of trust there with him as an artist. And when we were talking to him, we were quite surprised to hear that like those bloodhounds in the Major Blood old V1 costume was something that he come up with, because originally I was like,
Yeah.
that's such a great idea from Josh. I can't believe he came up with that. But he said no, actually that wasn't in the script.
And actually, they weren't even called that. They were called something else. We were like, oh, he has goons working with him. I don't remember exactly what I said. And then I was gonna call them something else. And then I think he suggested, it might have been him or Sean Makowitz, who's the publisher, might have suggested Bloodhounds, but it like totally works, right? And then he was the one that was like, what do I do this costume? And yeah, I think I had them as just like, oh, they're his goons. I was like, they're just his goons. Because they were gonna be cannon fodder, we knew they were gonna get shot at. So I was like, hey, this is what it is. And then he was like, what was this? And that's what things I do love working with him, is that he's like, what if it's this? It's like, that's such a cool, it's that back and forth. Because once you get that back and forth with your collaborators, then it challenges you to start being like, okay, like where I got to start bringing more to the table. It creates that nice dynamic with your collaborators where you're like, oh, they can do that, well, I can do this. Like you almost kind of start showing off to each other in a way. I love it.
And talking about collaboration, and Sean specifically there, what in terms of working with Sean and Robert Kirkman, that sort of Energon universe brain trust, how does that typically work in terms of how you build out the story and the kind of longer term direction of where you're planning to go?
It's a little different than you might expect, because it's a lot of conversations. So it's like, I'll go down to California, I'll meet with Robert and Sean and Ben Abernathy, who's the executive editor and he's the main editor now on Energon Universe and has been for almost a year. We'll all meet up and we just start talking about ideas. And I'm like, what about this, about this, about this? And then Robert will be like, well, I think we should do this. And, because Robert has White Rival plans, and then there's the stuff that Daniel's doing, and there's the overall bigger plans we've all kind of developed together. And then we just sort of talk it out, go to our separate corners, start working on the stuff we've talked about. And then every once in a while, somebody will send like like Robert will email and be like, I'm thinking about this. And I'm like, well, if you do that, I'll do this. And you start gaming it out like that. And, I saw Robert in, I think, May, and he and I, again, with like Sean and Ben, we were talking about all the bigger plans and the ideas. And it was like, oh, we do this. And like Ben Abernathy, he actually lives pretty close to me. He lives in Portland too. So he and I will go grab like a beer and pizza, and then we'll just like map out stuff and like, oh, about this and this, and talk about covers. And then it's funny, like I'll meet with at San Diego Comic-Con, I met with them for dinner, and then I was just telling Robert all these ideas I had, and he's like, I like this one, I like this, it was funny. At one point we were talking about when we introduce characters, like we don't want to like burn out, introduce too many characters too fast, right? And we would kind of bounce around a little bit, like we kind of sticks to a lot of the first 2 waves of toys initially, with a couple things here and there, like Mercer is obviously much later. We introduced a couple things that were later, but it was funny. We Makowitz and I, so this gives you some of the process. Makowitz and I went to the Hasbro panel, and we talked to them, so we know some stuff ahead of time. But we went to the Hasbro panel at San Diego Comic-Con, and I was just sitting there watching the show, and they showed us the design for one of the characters that's coming. And I just leaned over to Sean. And I was like, "We're gonna use that. I'm putting that in the book. Like that's gonna be in this issue. I already know exactly how we're doing it. This is where it's gonna happen." And he was like, "Okay." And then so that night at dinner with Robert, I had to be like, dude, check this out. This is what we're gonna do. And he was like, okay, cool, you can do that. So that's somehow the process works. It's just like, hey, I have a cool idea. Can I do this? And then it's just a lot of talking. And then, yeah, we have plans going out for years. Like this is really is a long term commitment. So it is about creating these milestones, but still having freedom to kind of pivot or to change things because you want to take where the characters are going to go. You want to follow the story. You want to follow the story, not the plans, right? So yeah.
I feel like we read early on that there was a 2-year plan.
I would feel like it's longer than that now. I mean, I think that yeah, it's definitely much much bigger than 2 years at this point.
So maybe the answer to this is one word and easy, but did the surprise and immediate success of the Energon universe have the teams changing, expanding the plans fast, early?
I mean, I was definitely, I don't know. I feel like I was surprised by how successful it was. I knew we were going to have hit books. I knew that, but there was a different energy here. There was something more than just like we sold a bunch of copies. Like there is obviously like real buzz. People are really happy. They're going into comic book stores to buy these books. And so that definitely did create, like, it made some things for me personally. I was like intimidated by it, because before it was like, this is a thing I love. It's a thing I love and I'm having fun. And then all of a sudden it was like, oh, no, this is serious now. So for me personally, there was a bit of intimidation, but I don't think we really changed any plans because of it. Like, I think, some of the stuff we're doing, like that's what we were doing, I mean, this whole rollout from Duke, Cobra Commander, Destro, Scarlet to Judge Number One, that was planned a long time ago, and so none of that has changed. And I think the only thing that we really made changes for is because of organic things. It's like as we're working, we're like, actually, this makes more sense for this character. Like that's really been the only time we've ever made changes. I don't think we've made any changes because it's been successful. I think the idea of planning things far out, we were always kind of doing. I think initially they had this 2 to 3 year plan, but now it's like, well, we could keep going and do something much, much bigger with it. And so at this point, the plan is much bigger. And even that, dude, here's the thing. Like, I could write this book for years and still not introduce every character. Right? Like, I mean, you see how we're doing it. We're not in any hurry. I was thinking about this. There's a couple characters that I really love. And I was like going over it and I was like, man, I love this character. It's one of my favorite characters. I don't think we're going to be able to introduce them until like, the issue 30s. It's somewhere in the 30s, So it's like, really doing it right. And I think having the room to breathe. But I don't think the success ever made us really make too many changes in terms of having this like big plan. I mean, even before, there was stuff with Robert where Robert would tell me like, oh, he has this idea, but he's like, that's like year 3 or year 4, and now he's a little bit like, oh, that might be year 5, so it is, but I don't think it's been that much of a change, at least on my end,
And you were talking a little bit about sort of the excitement of being in the Hasbro panel and seeing the some of their plans and stuff like that. It sounds like the working relationship between Hasbro and you guys is really good both ways.
Oh yeah, great.
And seeing the new toys, for me, part of what maybe was missing was some of the story elements of there's cool designs, but where's the story? Mm-hmm. So what's exciting is the potential for me is the potential then that gets built out in the comics, and we've had a hint of that already because we've seen the cover to issue 2, which features the Valkyries as a new creation for the toys. So can you talk about that element a little bit?
I have them right here. Yeah, I have that one right here. Yeah, the other Valkyrie right here. I have Cobra Commander. Cobra Commander might be my favorite G.I. Joe character. So I have this one on my desk right now. This is from the His Tank. This one that came with the His Tank.
Uh-huh.
And then I have a shelf over here that's like all the Cobra Commanders that have been revealed so far over here, including the Once a Man one that I got at San Diego. They gave to me. I was very happy with. The Valkyries. What's interesting with the Valkyries was we started working on it, and I was like, man, Cobra doesn't have a lot of women characters in it, and we're taking one away. Like we're taking the Cobra woman away, basically. Like we're moving Paranus over here,
Right.
and I was like, oh man, we knew we were bringing in Chameleon, Chameleon's backstory is really interesting in terms of like how she was created for us and how we're using her and where she's sort of like her toy background is really interesting. But so we were like, she's gonna be here, and then we were looking at like different stuff, and I was like, and then I had the Valkyries, I had them here in my office, and I was like, no one has ever used them because they're new. They're so new, they've never been in anything before. And so I was like, oh man, we get to introduce them for the first time. We actually get to use them, you know? But yeah, it is fun that we're able to sort of add to the mythology and the story that Classified is building. We're not trying to be, this is really important, like, we're not trying to be ads for the toys. You know, we're not trying to be, I feel like that's a happy, I don't want to call it a happy accident, but if people do buy the toys because of the comics, hey, that's awesome. That's great. But we are still trying to tell a story. And I think when you listen to the Hasbro team, when they do the live streams and stuff, they do the pulse streams and stuff, you can tell they really are trying to tell a story. They're doing something. They have intent. There is intent behind the decisions they make and why they choose certain things. So I think it's fun we can just add to that. Like we got to just keep on adding to what they're doing, you know. And even then, when you look at like our Joe team, Tom didn't just use the Classified designs. He did his own designs for them. Like, you know, like obviously Baroness has the biggest change, but look at the stuff of Duke and Stalker. Like it's a different look, but it's very much inspired by what the Hasbro team has been doing. Because I love those. Again, like I pretty much have all the Classified toys. I think I have all of them. So yeah.
Can't wait for this to go back the other way when Tom Riley's designs get turned into video game skins, trading cards, or action figures that all the collectors have to get.
Yeah, I know. It'll be fun. I'm hoping, you know, fingers crossed. I mean, my goal is not to do that. Don't get me wrong. Like, I love it when that happens. I've had that with DC characters where they've been turned into toys and stuff. And it's like, clearly I like toys. So it's like, clearly I have a lot of action figures in here. But I hope that is something that we're able to do, but it isn't my priority right now. My priority is just trying to tell the best story with these characters because I really love them. I love these characters. And so I want to just do them right, you know, and introduce them in a new light. That's really what my priority is.
Where are you signing the week that G.I. Joe issue #1 is released?
Yeah, I'm doing 3 signings that week. I might end up doing 4, but I'm doing 3 signings that week. So on Wednesday, the day it comes out, November 13th, we're going to be doing a signing at Things from the World in Hollywood at Universal City Walk. And then that night, we're going to be doing, for Skybound Insiders, we're going to be doing a screening of G.I. Joe, the movie, up at Universal. I'm very excited about that because I've never seen that on the big screen before. I have always wanted to, so I'm very pumped to be able to see it on a big screen. And then on Thursday at Collector's Paradise in North Hollywood, I'm doing a signing. And then on Saturday, I'm going all the way to the East Coast in Annapolis, and I'll be doing a signing at Third Eye at their big location, the Annapolis location. So I'm really excited about that. I'm trying to prioritize doing more appearances in stores the next couple of years. So I'm just happy to get out to these shops and try to, you know, and I might do some other signings in stores for this property, but that's where we're at right now. I'm just really excited to get out there and get back into stores.
That's brilliant. I think we're at time, so I do have lots more questions that I could ask, but
yeah, we'll do this again. We get this again. We can do one of these again. Like after we get through the first arc, maybe we'll do another one of these, and we can do a longer one.
Cool, sounds good. So
you were saying earlier that you were going to do a 4-hour talk in a few days. Mark and I have done 3-hour episodes, so challenge accepted.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Well, the reason I'm sure. Well, here's the thing. Like, obviously, you two are friends, right? So imagine if the two of you just record the two of you just being friends, which I imagine is part of it, right? Like that's ezy. You could easily sit there and talk, and that's where the live streams are fun because with that particular one with Comic Pop, he and I are friends, and so we'll do like every month we do a 2-hour video we post, like an hour and a half. But what would happen is we would probably talk for like 4 hours, but only record the middle 2 hours, right? And so I was like, dude, we could do this. Like we could easily do a 4-hour live stream. We could do it, and he was like, all right, let's go for it. So that's what we're doing. Yeah. So It'll be fun. But yeah, we should definitely do a longer one of these. We can get deeper into GI Joe. I'd love to hear from you. Like, we thought of issue one, your thoughts on GI Joe stuff. I thought the stuff we're doing on Energon Universe in general. So I think once we get deeper in, we can do another one of these.
Perfect.
Joshua, thank you so much. Thank you to
Yeah, no
Skybound
problem.
for arranging this this Talking Joe get.
Yay! I'm glad we finally got to talk. Sorry, I could be elusive at times.
And a
Wait, here,
reminder.
see this? I have this. Actually, I have two. I have the opened one, and then I have the unopened one. I'm gonna open this one though because I love getting. I'm a true builder guy, so I always have like a ton of
Yeah, we
stuff.
can all play these games. I've got this over here. You know.
Oh, you got that? I got two of those too. The only one that I have missed. Wait, is that Wreckage you just had?
That's the
Was that
Wreckage? Yeah, the Wreckage one.
Damn it, dude! I missed. See, that's the one. I don't always like asking Hasbro or Skybound to be like, "Hey, I missed this one. Can I have it?" Wreckage was the one that I missed, and so I still need to get Wreckage.
I think it. I think it keeps on popping up every now and again on Target online as well.
Yeah, I know. I just gotta grab it. A lot of times I can just ask, but I don't want to use that too much. is the best way to put it. I have some cool stuff. I have one toy I wish I could show you. They sent me early, but I think I would get in trouble if I showed you. But they sent me a really awesome. They sent me you'll know in a couple of weeks. They sent me a really, really cool one early, and I was like super pumped. So yeah, you'll know in a few weeks because I think I'll be able to talk about it in a few weeks. But they sent me one that I was like super crazy excited about. They sent me early, and they sent me two of them, so I was very happy. Anyway, all right, I gotta go. Thank you for hanging out with me. We'll do this again.
Thank you so much. So that was great talking to Josh, a key figure from the G.I. Joe comics more generally at this stage, but Energon Universe specifically that we hadn't yet spoken to at this point. So great to get him on the show. Tim, your reflections?
I think we did an amazing job. In all seriousness, this was a specific kind of interview. This is before G.I. Joe issue number 1 is released, but specifically this interview was for before the final order cutoff date for comic book retailers to order issue number 1 of G.I. Joe. They have placed their initial orders, and closer to the actual street date, very close to the actual print date, comic book retailers and stores can adjust their orders. And Skybound was interested in another promotional push, right, to sort of remind everyone how excited they are, so readers can go to their comic shops and say, I heard about G.I. Joe number 1, I'd like a copy. Or comic book store owners can say, I haven't ordered enough, I've got to increase my orders.
Yeah, and you, the listener, the reader, the best way to get that issue and to make sure that you're going to get it, but that your comic retailer knows how to order enough comics is to let them know in advance, and ideally get a pull list with your comic retailer so that they're putting that comic aside for you, and you don't have to worry whether it'll be there or not when you turn up at the shop.
So while we were certainly talking to Joshua Williamson around G.I. Joe number 1, and we have received advanced PDFs of the issue, we couldn't actually really talk about the issue. And so listeners and viewers, Mark and I look forward to doing our proper review and inspection of this oversized issue in November of 2024 when the issue actually comes out.
Perfect. So let's wrap up by reminding people where they can find you, Tim, when you are not talking to comic bigwigs.
Video essays on TV and film at my YouTube page, youtube.com/@AtomicAbe. My comic book store, a brick and mortar location you can visit in person, is in Somerville, Massachusetts, Hub Comics. And I write about G.I. Joe at my blog, arealamericanbook.com.
And if you are new to us, we are Talking Joe. The website is talkingjoe.co.uk. You can visit there and it will have all of the links to the places you can find us, like Instagram and Twitter and Facebook, etc. We normally drop a brand new episode every Thursday. So typically a look at the latest comic hitting the racks, like Duke, Cobra Commander, or G.I. Joe issue 1 in the future. And then we also are looking back at the past of Devil's Due, the comics that they released in the early 2000s. And we take great pride in talking to the creators of those G.I. Joe comics. So you can look into our archives for many interviews with G.I. Joe creators, including most of the Energon Universe creators at this point, which is great.
But if you are a Marvel 80s, 90s Real American Hero fan, Jim Shooter, Larry Hama, Rod Wiggum, Ron Wagner, so great. Okay, let's wrap up.
Big thanks to all of our Patreon members as well, who get early access to episodes like this. So big thanks to those guys over there. Yeah, over there being patreon.com/talkingjoe if you want to be in with the cool kids, of course. So I think we are done. And until next time, Tim, is there anything that you want us to remember and bear in mind as we go about our working week?
Nobody Beats Talking Joe, an international podcast.
Latest.